Okay, we should be recording now.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whichever it is, we can't keep track anymore because everybody's all over the world.
And that fact, everybody I know is all over the world. I think I know about 6 people in Newcastle.
Yeah, that's about my. No, I'm up to about 20 here in California, but I know way more people. And I've recently been talking to a friend in India. So that stretches an entire 12 hours and 30-minute time difference.
Right, okay, yeah, that takes a bit of doing. I'm trying to coordinate between a guy in um, Amsterdam and a guy in South Australia. So at the moment, trying to get a live stream together with them.
Yeah, that sounds like a 10 in the morning, 10 in the evening proposition.
It varies because they've both got strange schedules, but and I'm awake all night anyway, more or less. So I can do till about 2 in the morning, and then I fall asleep. But yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Yep, that's for sure. So, how's everything going in Dennis World?
Dennis World is okay. My health situation's ticking over. Nothing much is happening. Um, I'm having a conversation with the philosophy people about whether empathy exists or not at the moment. I'm arguing that it doesn't, which is not my normal position. My normal position would be arguing in favor of empathy, but for some reason I'm arguing against. I'm basically in denial about everything. I'm saying nothing exists. So my starting point is there, and then they've got to prove that it does.
Yeah, I recently said to somebody that I no longer believed in anything they taught us, and he accused me of being a nihilist. And it's like, no, just because I don't believe what they taught us doesn't believe I don't believe in anything to be true. It's just I don't believe the system adds up to make truth.
No, that's it. And when it's just like because we were talking about chimpanzee behavior, about reciprocal behavior with food and stuff, and
Mhm.
my argument is that it's enlightened self-interest. It's in your interest to share your food with people because they'll share their food with you.
Okay.
And the other people are arguing it's reciprocal altruism, which is basically the same thing, but it's just like it's a different way of describing the same behavior.
Well, I have an example of empathy from the animal kingdom that seemed to me quite unusual. I had an older cat that I was watching for a friend, and then she got a place where she could take the cat back, and so I didn't have any animals here. And to me, communicating with animals is one of those base level things that I always have a pet of some sort. So there
Yeah,
was a stray tabby in the neighborhood, and I started putting bowls of food out and attracting his attention. And it finally got to the point where he was able to come into the house and sort of realize that this was a place that was accepting to him. A couple days later, he brought in this jet black cat that was old, skinny, and well worn. And it was one of those things where he made sure she got to eat whatever I fed him. And now I have two cats. But the younger one brought in the older one because she wasn't keeping care of herself and she was obviously hungry and wet and such.
yeah,
And I thought that was I thought that was altruistic behavior on the part of the younger cat, which is something I hadn't often seen. And even today, the two cats play off each other. The younger cat will go clean up the food after the older cat has eaten. They get fed in separate bowls, but they're always eating out of each other's bowl. And it really doesn't matter except to them because they're used to where they get fed. But
Yeah, they just go back to the same place, don't they?
yeah, it showed me that empathy in the animal kingdom exists at times, although most people think it's survival of the fittest.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm arguing that it doesn't really exist. Well, the behavior obviously exists, but whether it's empathy or not is another thing.
Yeah, yeah, and humans right now are very self localized, and so there's not much human empathy going on in the world.
No, I'm probably arguing that everything that looks like empathy is enlightened self-interest, because at some point the other cat will be hungry, and the older one will find food for it if it's sick or whatever.
Yeah, well, I've had the cats now for a year and a half, and the older one is starting to become infirm. I had to set up a litter box because she just wasn't making it outside. But it's interesting to watch the cat behavior. They're still like cats. One minute they'll be curled up together, the next minute they'll be swatting paws. But seems to me that cats can read humans a lot better than humans can read cats.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, animals generally. I had a friend who had a Jack Russell, and he got the Jack Russell because its owner died. So it was a bit traumatized because it suddenly didn't have the person that it was used to having around.
Mm-hmm.
So I was subtly doing some Reiki sessions for it without telling anybody that's what I was doing. And the dog obviously realized what was going on, and it suddenly became its best friend. And I ended up with it sitting on my lap with a microphone in front of it. So we took some, those old His Master's Voice photos with the dog and the record player. We kind of did that. We kind of did a version of that with this Jack Russell. Anyway, but the point is, I used to just do, like, talk to it as if it's a person, and do Reiki sessions as if it's a person that's grieving or traumatized or whatever. You could see it was traumatized. It wasn't difficult to work out. Um, but yeah, a few short kind of 5-minute Reiki sessions. This is in the pub I was doing this because it was a guy I know from the bar. Um, yeah, the dog sorted itself out. The dog was fine after about 4 or 5 months. And obviously, it got used to the new guy who was looking after it. It was happy in the bar. It started going up to people that didn't know, which was new behaviour. So it was obviously comfortable in the bar after a while. And it's a bar with loads of dogs in it, so they're not all in there at the same time. It tends to be chaotic if they are. But if all the dogs obviously know that there's other dogs in the bar because they can smell them. So it makes it a comfortable place for dogs to be, and then they relax a bit. That
Here
makes
they have to
sense.
be service animals to get into the bar.
Say that again.
Here they have to be service animals to get into the bar.
All
Otherwise,
right.
the bar
Well,
won't let them in.
yeah, there's some bars won't let you take dogs in, but there's others that'll have like dog treats behind the bar and stuff. They feed them, and once they've been fed, then they immediately love it because they're being fed. But yeah, it's tricky when there's three people bringing their dogs in at the same time because they don't always get on in a small space. But other than that, it's pretty much okay.
Yeah, I really think humans would be well served to spend more time trying to communicate with their pets and build up that telepathy that we have, but we don't really recognize because people are afraid to use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it seems to me that stepping back from all situations and rethinking things at a base level is necessary for continued human existence to be worthwhile and successful. That right now there's a control battle with two sides, neither of which even understands that human scale is something different and that humans really do not want to fight each other in wars made for the benefit of the oligarchs.
No, there's not a chance that when Keir Starmer's talking about putting troops into peacekeeping British peacekeeping troops into Ukraine, the odds of that happening are zero because the people wouldn't want to do it. Number one, so nobody's going to sign up for it. I mean, the army that's already there would have to do it, but they would do it in a very kind of limited way because it's not what they do. It's not their thing. Um,
Your people could just vote to send their politicians to Ukraine and solve both problems.
that would absolutely solve the problem, Lenny. You're absolutely right. Let them fight it out in a cage match somewhere, and then just
Or even over a chessboard.
yeah,
Make it so that the politicians are the front line. Maybe add some suicide bombers, and then we'd all be better off.
yeah. Just put the military-industrial complex in with the suicide bombers.
Hmm. And make sure they get the politicians when they do it. But
Yeah,
I've been reading old Clancy novels this winter, and it really explains the workings of the mill industrial complex and the intelligence community. And now I've moved on to an author called Kyle Mills,
right.
who, yeah, he's like Clancy. He doesn't write near as elegantly or wordily, but it's the same type of thing. The guy who's the assassin for the CIA on the front lines is dealing with the problems.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
but
watching a thing on Netflix and I've forgotten the name of it, but it was really, really good. It'll come to me in about 10 minutes when we've changed the subject. But yeah, that was basically a Tom Clancy novel.
yeah, I think that if we step back and look at how the novelists portray the government, that's where people get their illusions of how government works, not from what they're taught or what they see. It's it's really worth our time to see if we can't come up with a system that's ground up from people rather than ground down the people. Because right now, what's going on in this country is ridiculous. You've got Trump and the federal judiciary in a pissing match, fighting over whether to take terrorists back to their countries or let them stay in the United States. And for the life of me, I don't see where the United States Constitution should be used to protect the non US citizens. That it's not the world constitution. And they really don't follow the Geneva Convention, which everybody is signed up for. And I work with a friend, Carol Rosin, to keep weapons out of space, but it's kind of moot because they've already got the weapons in space. And now they're starting to use them for things like direct energy beams to cause fires. And I just think it's time that we, the people, withdrew from the system and set up something that could be held accountable. Of course, that's a dream. It's not going to happen. Too many people believe what they're taught in the public schools.
Yeah, I mean, what do you have in mind? What does it look like, Lenny? Describe the new system to me.
It would involve having representation by profession so that maybe lawyers would get 7% and doctors would get 6%, and every different profession would have a number of representatives looking out for people of that profession. And you might even go beyond professions and get a few homemakers and a few taxi drivers and other things that people do to make a living. But pretty much I decouple the making a living from the economic system. I try and balance things so that trades could be made. But if the value of the trade wasn't sufficient to make the trade, that's where I'd call on the government to support the lower valued position and make the trade equivalent so it could go through. People people here don't grow their own bananas or their own coffee or things like that. No cacao, you can't make chocolate. But those things are necessary in life. And so sending out things that will help the countries that are producers would be important. I also think that economically, setting boundaries so that there's a floor and a ceiling would be important. I would argue that medical care is worthless, but if people want to be supplied with medical care, they should be. And when I say it's worthless, I don't mean in your situation or that. I just mean the idea of doctors being gatekeepers for big pharma and getting everybody hooked on opioids for minor injuries and psychological problems just doesn't make sense. But it would help to have good, reasonable analysis that include truthfulness. And I don't think the way the system is currently set up, there's any visibility of what's actually going on. It's all secret societies and closed door meetings and business people talking to themselves and making decisions that only involved excess money being made. And you can look at a lot of things and see that most of the cost of the endeavor is the middlemen that have added to the cost. That if the producer and the consumer were put together, the costs would be really small.
Yeah, markup on everything over here. When I had we had a furniture shop at one point about 20 years ago. It's a completely different life, but I was a company director of a furniture shop that belonged to a friend of mine, and the markup on the furniture was 100% basically. We would get it in and then mark it up 100%.
Yeah.
So
And
I mean it's the same with all kind of retail operations. The retail markup's 100, the wholesale markup's 100. So it doubles and
yeah,
then doubles again before it gets to consumers.
once I learned how much wholesale costs were, I became I felt capitalism became distasteful, that the markup, and it's a lot about positioning. If you're in the right position, you can extract money from both sides to get things done. And there's too many middlemen, as I said earlier.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. Uh,
It would it would also be nice to do a re-ranking of professions because law and medicine are not the two top professions, but they sure think they are and run everybody else for their own benefit. Um, notice how very few of the politicians don't have either law degrees or medical degrees. And it's only in the last 30 years that the ones with medical degrees are politicians because they noticed it was in their own self interest to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of people also are under non disclosure agreements, and we might try and find a way to decorporatify the entire system, that instead of rulings like Citizens United, which makes corporations people, we should specifically not give corporations the rights of people because they don't have the responsibilities of people and they don't die off, so that everything that's based on longevity is eventually in the corporation. So I don't know. I really don't. Everybody seems to be marveled at AI, and AI is a booby trap. It can't think for itself. It thinks how it was programmed, and it was programmed by people who have reasons to want the what do they call the movement? The trans.
Transhumanism.
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't know. I don't see much choice for getting change gradually, but it's going to fall apart worldwide all at once. And we should at least be thinking through other options so we don't have to bring it back up with central banks, politicians, and the ridiculous sort people by geography into voting blocks so that there's no commonness between what anybody in any region is about.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to fall apart as soon as we get to the point where AI takes the high paying jobs, which isn't going to be that long away. I think the lawyers and the medics are going to be in for a shock because artificial intelligence can do those jobs, and
Yeah, and the
they'll get paid a
lawyers
lot
have
less.
the system rigged for their own benefit to keep people out by not filing paperwork properly. That goes away with AI.
Yeah, yeah, all the closed shop stuff, all like the way the bar works and everything it's all just a system, isn't it? So you can program artificial intelligence to do that, to pass through legislation or whatever, and come out with good questions.
What I'd love to see is 10 different systems be proposed that are nothing like the system that we have, and then allowances for communities to try those systems and see what works so that you can choose what law to follow, but you have to follow one of the bodies of law, and they can mutually between themselves discuss those fuzzy areas because the libertarians and the conservatives, while pinned together in the world right now, have very different beliefs on how government should operate.
Yeah, I mean, if we got a few, I think it's good. We're going to end up with city states, so we'll probably end up with local law systems anyway at some point. But a lot of it's going to be, well, it'll be centrally controlled but managed locally, kind of the way it is now, but with artificial intelligence instead of people, and drones on every corner, and RFID chips in people's heads. That's the way we're going. But it's not something I won't be around to see that. Hopefully.
No, and if they try and enforce that upon me, I won't even be around to see it enforced because I will object strenuously. But I pretty much dropped out of most of the system. And fortunately, my finances are good enough that if there's something I want to buy or do or have, I can do that. but it hasn't always been that way in this life. In fact, back when we first started the radio show, I was specifically anti spending money to see if I could get through a whole month without spending a cent. And it's funny, a couple months it was needing to do laundry and feeding about $5 to a machine in a laundromat that made me spend money because,
Right.
clothes only stay clean a day to three, depending on
Yeah.
what you're doing. And sometimes you're changing two or three times in a day if you're doing work that needs to be done but isn't clean. It would also be very, very useful for us to find a way to put children into the daily control of grandparents and get those two age groups connected and learning from each other, as opposed to having parents who, when both of them work, end up raising latchkey kids in a nuclear world that blows apart families instead of bringing them together. Back when I was a kid, there was nothing about extended families all living in the same neighborhood where grandparents, parents, children, and grandkids all lived together and helped each other out in that. But the nuclearization of the family has kids going off to college and never coming back home and not even dealing with their parents until they're married and need a babysitter. But oh, by the way, when they live thousands of miles away, that's not feasible. But children have been taught to fear older people and to trust what they learn in the schools from idiocy. And so there's a desperate need to do things different in raising children, keeping care of elderly, and it just seems like that can be balanced out without putting more pressure on the working people. In fact, I'd almost divide the society into rules for working people and rules for people who are, quote, at leisure, which isn't really leisure because everybody's working at something. But if you're not being paid by the man, there's no reason why you should have to jump through all the ridiculous hoops like taxes and things like that. I also wonder if voting makes any sense at all. Why don't we get intelligent leaders to make decisions and let things happen rather than replacing our leadership or not replacing our leadership and giving votes of confidence to idiots because we're only given a choice between two idiots? We don't have any real people running. Let's see what
Yeah,
the
it's
Trump.
tricky.
Oh, go ahead.
It is tricky. Go ahead, Lenny.
I want to see what happens in a couple more months of this Trump administration because some of the people he brought in to do some of the tasks need the time to get those tasks done, and then we'll see what happens. But it is my prediction that Trump is going to take the U.S. isolationist, will break treaties with the Europeans, set a new treaty with the Russians, and pretty much isolate itself if the world continues in the pattern that I see it in right now.
Yeah, it certainly it looks like that from where I'm sitting. It looks like Trump's is putting a boundary around North America, basically.
Well, the Canadians and Mexicans are not too happy with such boundary, but yes, it does look like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a strange way to look at the world, but it's effectively the same principles the Trilateral Commission was set up to do in the 70s, isn't it? It's North and South America is one block, Europe and Africa and the Middle East is another block, and then Asia is the third block, with Australia the end of Asia.
Yeah, I'm thinking that right now the BRICS looks a lot more effective than the NATO area, and that it won't be too long before various European states start joining the BRICS. Although, maybe not, because the European leadership seems to have gone off the edge here in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I think the main country that's likely to join BRICS is Turkey, because they've been refused entry to the European Union for years. So it makes sense for them to join into something. If they can't get into Europe, they might as well join BRICS.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way where individual people could join BRICS in order to have a different economic system. But gee, one of the problems we're facing is a real lack of understanding of how things work by a majority of the people. And even the ones who know how things work understand that because that's the way A, they've been taught, and B, it always has been. But neither of those two reasons are good reasons to continue with something that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, if BRICS come up with a new currency, then when the way to for individuals to join BRICS would be to start using the new currency and trade between us with the new currency. So that would take away the old system completely. But then still going to end up with a digital currency and a central bank. So it doesn't
Yeah,
really. All it does is change the name of it. Doesn't change the structure of it very
I'm
much.
with you there. I'm not for the BRICS. It's just I would love the alternative to be able to choose the BRICS instead of the way it currently is. But both are going to fall in the economic collapse because world trade is dependent on too many insanities, like the supply chains, which absolutely get stuff there just in the nick of time to keep it going. That isn't going to happen very much longer, especially with the reliability of some of the systems we're dealing with. And so I don't know. I think that hard times internationally will lead to better times locally for those places that actually can support the people in their location to be better. But I do think that if we could switch systems of representation to the point where individuals sign off on everything that goes off, even if it's just by proxy of choosing somebody to make decisions for them, uh, we can human scale things that get done and at least take away the corporation, the profiteering, the wars, and the misery caused by the fact that large groups don't recognize, in any sense, humans on human scale. It's funny how scale works because I look at a scale as 3 orders of magnitude up and 3 orders of magnitude down, so that human scale and physical reality would go from a grain of sand or a grain of salt up to planets in a solar system, let's say.
Yeah.
And anything outside that range, up or down, would be a different scale. But scales have 50% overlap if they're adjacent and 25% overlap if there's one scale in between. And if there's two scales in between, it's 12% overlap. And that's
Uh-huh.
about, you're not even going to recognize 12% overlap. That's 1 thing in 10 that's the same. And so I think we might have a basic problem in physics that by universalizing physics with all these stupid constants like the speed of light, which is variable depending on what the wavelength of light is, but nah, that's not the way physics believes it. But you see, everybody alive now has been educated in the same system with the same basis set. Are you familiar with Cliff High?
Yeah, I've heard some of his stuff. Yeah.
His concept of gritology being the paradigm and ontology being the reality makes a lot of sense to me. That would mean that everything we do on a living earth is a function of something live at a different scale, one that we're not necessarily working on. But it makes sense to me that water is alive at about at a slightly greater than 3 jump system from us, because, well, from us down 1 is biochemistry, and from that down 1 is chemistry, and from at the chemistry level, water is smaller than most atoms.
Right.
It's a very, very small molecule. It's about the size of oxygen or nitrogen. But the fact that it's got bonds to hydrogen and oxygen to hold it together makes it a molecule instead of an atom. But at that scale, if water has intelligence and can direct things like humans have intelligence and can direct things, it could be a very fractal scale to the one we're on, not working exactly the same, but following the same patterns. And if you look at it from a larger perspective, giving similar results.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. It's a very attractive idea that water's holding consciousness, or is consciousness in effect.
Yeah, I couldn't extrapolate smaller than that because I think theoretical physics is full of it and that none of it makes any sense. I also think that it's entirely possible that when we look out at the stars, we're looking at the nuclei of other cells within a living system, but broadened to the point where we can't tell our own perspective. That we, as humans, work on the nucleus of a cell internally, but that nucleus would be the sun, not the planet Earth. That planetary scale and galactic scale are very, very different, but similar in relationship to human scale and water scale,
Right.
atomic scale. One of the physicists I do like who's out there talking about scale is Nassim Haramein. And it took him a long time to break the barrier of physics publications because he wasn't formally schooled. But now formal schooling is no longer a requirement for being intelligent. And in some ways, maybe formal schooling makes people disintelligent because they can't accept things that are outside their common reality. But I I get back to timelines where I think that everybody's on their own individual timeline in addition to a group timeline, and that maybe the process of sleep is a switching point to synchronize timelines and get people up for the next time, but that while the paradigm remains the same, the narrative can change. And the narratives within the paradigm are only fixed by events that are deliberate and located to be, like landing on the moon or blowing up a couple of towers, that those happen on every paradigm, but the narratives to get there change, so that what we're seeing and calling the Mandela effect is actually the merging of two different timelines within a paradigm that don't have the same narrative, and a way of sort of crunching them together, because everything is an in breath and an out breath, an expansion and a contraction. And we sort of forget that by being involved in the details of life.
Yeah, it's interesting. The timeline thing's interesting. I'm playing a little bit still with quantum jumping. Did one the other night. I don't know whether it worked or not yet, but I was looking for a way to obviously to manifest better health. So I was trying to jump onto a timeline that had me with better health, but I want to keep the insights that I've had for the last year, because it's been a good year in terms of insights. I've shifted my position on a lot of different things, and I probably wouldn't have done that if I'd not been sick. I've had the time to think about stuff, and I've had the time to analyze stuff in more detail, and kind of go through it in my head. It's probably why I'm not sleeping very well, because I've got so many things I'm trying to work through.
You tend to have conversations with everybody you encounter. And so when you're talking to an MD, a medical doctor, your conversation is much, much broader than the average human's conversation with that medical doctor, which is basically just questions about what the doctor says and getting on the page to listen to everything. I think your approach works much better on human scale. And I think that individually, there are some fine, upstanding medical doctors who really know their stuff. But paradigm wise, with what they're taught, there's a lot of individual work to get it right, because what they're taught isn't quite right. I mean, anatomy and physiology is pretty basic once you get to understand it. There are things like nerves and vessels and organs and stuff like that. But even today, I hear a lot of people talking about how the heart pumps blood, and no, the heart's not a pump, it's a muscle. And the way it works is really intriguing, works in vortex energy. But certain individuals come up with theories and can't get past the academic disdain, because the academics just think that every advance needs to come out of them, and they're not on base any longer. So it's a
Yeah, I mean,
strange world.
yeah, my kidney consultant was quite open in the end. I mean, she wasn't happy that I was taking so much control about me health situation, because her automatic thing was just to put me on pills, whereas my automatic thing is to not put me on pills. So we had a bit of a conflict going on. But once she worked out that I was actually doing stuff myself, then she relaxed a little bit. Um, so the only thing I've got to sort out now is whether I switch to some kind of herbal version of what Lamorpharin's doing in 6 months. I think I'm going to try and find a herbal version, so at least I can do the dosage myself. Because at the moment I'm relying on the hospital to ring me with a dosage based on the tests that they're doing at the hospital, but they haven't rung me today. So I've just got to carry on regardless until somebody rings me. And I'd rather just be able to do it. Find a way to do it intuitively with herbs, and then I can then I'm not relying on somebody else to give me dosage. I can do, if I can figure it out intuitively and work out the dosage range or whatever, then I won't need anybody to tell me. I can just figure it out. It makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, you get how you feel, you take the herbs and then make the decision of whether you need to take a little more or next time cut back to a little less. But yeah, when I was in my hallucinogen state where I like to do different dosages of different hallucinogens in order to see how they acted with me, that was pretty much the approach I took. But there's nobody out there other than maybe reading something like Carlos Castaneda that allows you to make that sort of comparison. And I got to the point where I got really paranoid and quit everything that was hallucinatory because I couldn't tell what was real and what was a hallucination. And I find it funny that right now that's part of the conversation on AI is that AI hallucinates and makes things up. And my experiments in looking at AI and doing the same sort of work humanly and seeing what the difference is tells me that AI is definitely pre programmed with an attitude that if things aren't exactly as the AI thinks it should be, it'll ignore a statement or not bring it up. And things that make sense to the AI that pushes the agenda, the AI will emphasize.
So
I
it's
was at,
reinforcing. Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense.
I was at a meeting where we get an AI wrap up for the meeting right after the meeting, just a quick summary of what went on. And it's a fairly new group, so we have people presenting their own work. But somehow this week, the AI got the idea that the presentation of this woman's work was something that we had already bought in on and our organization should be doing. And so it was incorporating this stuff right into the main ideas when it shouldn't have. It wasn't part of what we're doing. And in fact, I'm going to see if anyone else caught it and corrects it because it will. Well, the thing I can't tell is if it remembers what's going on from meeting to meeting, or if its summary of the meeting is entirely that meeting and that meeting alone, and that over the broad case of a dozen different meetings, each one is not oriented into the pack. Whereas with humans going to meetings, if you've been to a dozen meetings with the same group, it has moved from getting to know some new people to serious consideration of aspects of what can be done. And
Yeah,
this group is about creating eco villages worldwide. And it contains a whole lot of people working on a whole lot of different scales, from people trying to put together things that are guidelines for entire eco villages to people on the ground trying to figure out how to house a few more people within their eco village and that sort of thing. And I tried to get an idea of the order of scale that we were working on, and it's everything from second order to fifth order, where first order is basic individual human scale, and eighth order is basic collective human scale. And what I'm finding is by making 8 orders in that topic and working from individual human scale up, by the time you get to that fourth order scale, the people who are humans operating a fourth order group the only human they deal with in their theory is themselves. And they can't apply what they're doing across to other humans because they're in an exceptional position of being so in tune with that fourth order goal that they've lost the in tune with humanity. And that's the break where individual humans don't get to sign off on what happens on any scale bigger than that. And so you look at huge groups in the world today, and huge is a relative term also, because 1 million people certainly is huge, but the population of a bunch of cities is well over 1 million worldwide. And so we do have groups operating on those scales, countries which work one scale up from city states are a whole nother system well out of touch. And there is no real world organization for organizing countries because of individual human greed and the incapacity of those leaders to relate to common people.
Right. Right. Well, anyway, we're coming up to the hour, so I think we need to start to think about wrapping up. Is there anything else you want to kind of talk about while I've got you here?
No, but I'll thank you for going into some of the depths of this sociochemistry with me, because I really feel that talking through and answering questions and seeing those interaction points is going to make the difference later on, that individuals can do what they do relatively free from bothering. But once you grow to a size where you're working with multiple individuals, it reaches a point where those individuals are representing people, and we all represent the all from each of us. So there's a lot of different ways to go deeper into this, and I'm glad our philosophy talk went in that tangent today. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries at all. I'll keep I'm going to try and ask good questions, Lenny, and then I'll just let you roll from there. And that seems to work quite well in these conversations, anyway.
Yeah, if people want to see what I'm doing, I'm putting things out at newway.com, where new is KNEW and way is WEIGH. So we can take everything we knew and weigh it again. But newway.com, it's my blog, but when you go behind the blog, there's more detail and some of the stuff I'm trying to work out with the help of AI, because AI does a lot of good things. I mean, table of contents, glossary, summaries, those are usually pretty good as long as there's a human reading behind it and making the corrections. And I've done that with some of these documents, but I felt it was more important to get the idea down in a place where it would stay for a while. And hopefully this website will stay for a while. Although I know if you go to my previous website, out.com, it's not there. It's gone. It has been eaten by the nether stream of everything. And I went back looking for some of my old videos, and it takes a while, but generally you can find an old video if you know it's there. Okay. I think I've said most of what I've said. I'll stay on after you finish the recording.
Right. Oh, I'll wrap that up there then. Thanks for coming in, Lenny. It's much appreciated. We'll do it again maybe in a week or two, and I'll ask some more good questions and let you roll and see where the conversation goes.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
All right, man. Take care. Let's